All right, let's bring in Brian Kilmeade, co-host of Fox and Friends and host of One Nation with Brian Kilmeade, already off to a great start. Brian, great to see you. Thanks for being here. We are waiting to see the press briefing is happening shortly at the White House. And I don't know, we don't have a seat in the room. They're still on COVID protocols, so there's, not all the reporters can be in the room at one time. So she might not even get a question on this, but certainly it should be followed up.
Sandra, a couple of things. Anytime there is an opportunity to do a poll about what matters most to the American people, you know what's number one and number two? Inflation and crime. You just flip them back and forth depending on how bad the numbers are. With your business background, I know you zero in on that. The other thing is, beyond a shadow of a doubt, 22 major cities sees a significant rise in gun assaults, aggravated assaults, domestic violence, and homicides across the country. Okay, so we have identified there is a huge problem. Do we all agree on that? Then the question is, what are you doing about it? And the question is, what does President Biden do about it? It's true he doesn't say defund the police, but what does he say? Really, since the 1990s, he's not really been tough on crime. Since Bill Clinton was in the office, he has not been tough on crime. It's so easy to go back and say, well, crime was rising under President Trump. True. But is there anyone, including his gravest critics, who didn't think that Trump wanted to crack down on crime? But he's not the mayor. He's not the police chief in Seattle. He is not the mayor of Chicago. He doesn't do anything in Portland. He can't control New York City. But what he can do is say, what do you need? I could give you federal troops. I can give you federal aid. And what did he do? He jettisoned them in Seattle. And immediately they were pushed back by the Democratic mayor. This president has an opportunity to save what would be left of a decent 2022 election. When he appears with Eric Adams on Thursday, talk about, I want to pressure the Democratic legislature, the Democratic City Council, to get rid of no cash bail. I want them to pressure these DAs who are embarrassing this country, Garcon and others, the Chesa Bodine over in San Francisco, Alvin Bragg, who promises to destroy New York City, on their horrible philosophies. They're allowing crime to go rampant. Chesa Bodine actually ran, Sandra, on the premise, I will not crack down on quality of life crimes. Great. Now they have no quality of life in San Francisco. Is that your goal? So the question is not what he thinks, it's what he does. Not what he says and what actions you will take against your own party.
Shoplifter's paradise there in San Francisco can walk out of a store with something and not face any consequences for it. All right, so these are Jen Psaki's words. I want to make sure that we put them out there because she was asked about it in the briefing yesterday. But this is the podcast where she seemingly laughed off Fox's coverage of the crime crisis.
And then on Fox is Jeanine Pirro talking about soft on crime consequences. I mean, what does that even mean, right? So there's an alternate universe on some coverage. What's scary about it is a lot of people watch that.
That's a very real thing, soft on crime consequences. I mean, look at these great American cities that are being destroyed by it. And by the way, you don't have to just watch here to know that that's a problem. I mean, you can ask those polled that are extremely or very concerned about higher U.S. crime rates. It's at 81%, Brian. I don't think you can get there by just watching TV coverage of it. This is something that people are feeling every single day when they walk around their city and towns.
Couple of things. When she says a lot of people watch this, how about almost every news viewer is watching us? And if you take all those other ratings and pour them together, they still don't amount to people who watch Sandra Smith and today Trace Gallagher. And I'll go drill down on one of her points. It is, well, I put money aside in the rescue plan back in March on the $1.9 trillion. There was $350 million put aside for cops.
Brian,
but those cops, that money could use for anything.
Can you hang on live to the briefing room? She's being asked about it right now.
And the Attorney General will join with law enforcement officials alongside elected leaders, including Mayor Adams, Governor Hochul, at the New York Police Department headquarters to discuss the work that federal, state, and local law enforcement officials are doing to quickly take guns and repeat shooters off of our streets. Afterward, President Biden, Attorney General Garland, Mayor Adams, Governor Hochul, and other elected leaders will visit with community violence intervention leaders in Queens to talk about the community-led work to interrupt gun gun violence. The president outlined a comprehensive plan last year to tackle gun crime that includes giving cities historic funding through the American Rescue Plan to put more cops on the beat and support community violence intervention programs, as well as initiatives like after-school programming, creating economic opportunities, and reducing recidivism to address the root causes of gun crime. The president's budget also doubles federal support for community policing, with $300 million more for cities, plus another $200 million for community violence interventions, a total of $500 million for these strategies that are proven to reduce gun crime. And he's going to continue to urge Congress to act on that. Finally, the Department of Justice continues to step up their efforts to combat violent crime and gun trafficking, including through 5 strike forces launched last year in New York City and other regions. As the Department of Justice reported just last week, those efforts have resulted in thousands of guns and violent criminals being taken off the streets over the past year. But they will, of course, have more to say on Thursday. Why don't you kick us off?
It's been a busy news day, so I have a few. Off the top, Senator Manchin just said that Build Back Better is dead.
All right, there you have it. Trace, she actually did make a statement right off the top there. She had not started her Q&A. That she came out with, a prepared statement. And we did know the president was planning to travel to New York this week. They announced that last week. Giving further details, he'll be traveling here with AG Garland, meeting with local leaders on the ground, including Mayor Adams of New York City. She also talked about the allocation of funds that we were just talking to Brian Kilmeade about to the police. So that was, I would take it as a response or a follow-up to what we heard from her yesterday.
Yeah, but, you know, it's what she didn't say. It's also important there because she has been criticized for not really going after these soft-on-crime crime prosecutors across the country. They repeatedly go after guns, the gun problem, the guns, and say nothing about the people who are firing those guns who are back on the street because of these soft-on-crime policies in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, New York, etc. And that's kind of where people are wanting this administration to at least acknowledge that there's a problem out there.
Brian Kilmeade's still with us. Brian, thank you for staying with us. Your reaction to what you just heard from Psaki.
Number one, it shows that it matters, that station, that horrible station, what does that even mean? You led with the stats that we were questioning all day and all morning long. So we do matter. Number two is, what will he do besides meet with his favorite mayor, according to that mayor, Mayor Eric Adams? What will he do besides that? He has got to turn around to the Democratic governor and said, no cash bail is not working. He's got to turn around to those legislators, you Democrats, and say, find a way to crack down on crime and back these people up. Until that, it's just words. And the American people, not Democrats or Republicans, are not going to tolerate their lives being destroyed and sitting there watching their Rite Aids being looted. It's not going to work. What do they not understand about this? This is not working. It's not an opinion. It's not a tax cut or a tax increase. This is right and wrong. It's not right and left. I'm flabbergasted that they don't realize this, even for their even if it's only for their political benefit.
And by the way, she also is issuing that statement and reminding everyone that Biden's coming to New York after the president of the Fraternal Order of Police came out with a very strong condemnation of what he said was the appearance that she was laughing off crime being a real issue in this country. He said she may feel safe in the White House, one of the most protected buildings in the U.S., but not everyone feels safe in their workplace. He said the world we find ourselves in is dangerous and becoming increasingly more so. Real quick, final, Brian?
My final thought about is this. There's going to be another officer buried on Wednesday. Why are you coming Thursday, Mr. President? Come Wednesday. Why did you go see a broken bridge on Friday? Go to St. Patrick's on Friday. Then we won't care about what your policies are. We'll know where your heart is. That's what the American people would respond to. And if he saw what we saw last week, there wouldn't be any giggling when the word crime came up on our station or when Janine Pirro spoke, because she happens to be a law and order judge.
It's a real crisis, and it's one that's driving a lot of business out of this city. Small businesses are having a hard time staying open. They can't even call the police and have them show up. In some cases, the police are so inundated with calls, and we have less of them. And by the way, you've got major bank CEOs saying that it's tough to recruit people to work in the city. It's tough to get people back from work from home back to the city, not because of COVID. They're having a hard time because people say they don't feel safe on public transportation and working and walking down the streets in New York City. I'm sure you're going to be talking about that on your new hit show, One Nation, Saturdays, 8 p.m. Brian Kilmeade.
Go get him, Sandra. Thank you.
Okay.
Give my best to Trace.
Thank you, Brian.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.